Executive Director of the Cloud Foundry Foundation. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what Cloud Foundry is, I'm going to talk a little bit about it today, very briefly. But first, how many of you here, okay, that doesn't work. How many of you here are developers, are aspiring developers? Most of you, all right. This is exciting. I want to talk a little bit about your role and where we're all going, and what it means, and why Cloud Foundry exists, and what our vision is for the future. In the 1800s, rich barons had the idea for the first transcontinental railroad. You know, their vision was to really remake logistics. SL railroads mentioned a lot here, but the original vision was a little bit less around moving people and moving things, supply chain, logistics, really figuring out new ways and faster ways to get things across the transcontinental United States. But it wasn't those barons that turned it into the reality that it was. It was the thousands of engineers, architects, the creators that turned that into the reality that it was. Or, I'm from San Francisco. Some of you may have heard of this small town in California, in the Americas. We have a major icon of our city is the Golden Gate Bridge. But the Golden Gate Bridge was actually conceived as from an architect who was trying to figure out how to solve a people problem. You had the people in Marin who the only way they could get to the mainland was across a boat. And so this architect had the idea, they fundraised around the idea for this bridge, but it was the hundreds of thousands or the thousands of engineers and the creators that turned it into one of the great landmarks it is today. You're probably wondering, where am I going with this? How many of you here have a smartphone? How many have two? Let's see. You know, for me, I would rather lose my wallet than lose my smartphone. You know, it's how I checked in for my flight. It's how I called an Uber to get here. It's how I check in for my hotel. It's how I order groceries. In the city, we can have anything delivered if you have a smartphone, which is fascinating because I hate to go places. So, you know, for me, it is invaluable. And it wasn't, you know, I have an iPhone, and it wasn't because Steve Jobs came up with the idea of this great new shiny phone in 2007. When it first came out, I thought, okay, great, it takes photos, nice, text, great. But it was 2008 when the App Store came online. And what's really turned it into the valuable tool that it is today is the thousands of apps that sit on that. So for me, the iPhone is a platform. It's a platform for applications that allow me to check in for my flight. You know, it's that app. It's the app that allows me to connect to my bank. It's the app that allows me to order Uber. It is all of those things. Those applications are what make it the tool that it is. And so my working theory is that developers are the heroes. The developers are the makers of the marvels that we're going towards. One of the things that I spend a lot of time talking about is digital transformation. And I know the word is starting to become a little overused and overhyped, but it doesn't change the fact of where things are going. Every day, organizations, I deal a lot with large, but this conversation is happening in medium and small companies too. They're asking their teams to fail faster, innovate more, and be more responsive to customers. And frankly, customers are expecting that too. You know, the iPhone, the iPad, these applications, the proliferation of technology has changed our perception of things. And I remember when I started out in my career in tech 20 years ago, and I did a lot of e-commerce work. How many of you here remember orange pages, outage windows? When you took the outage down, because it's Friday night at midnight, what are you going to do? Do work on the site. Now today, how many of you are pissed off if you see that? Right? How many of you are like, what? You're down? I can't transfer money at midnight on a Saturday night? What's going on? You're pissed. Like 15 years ago, I was like, yeah, all right, I'll go back tomorrow. But now, your expectation as a user is it's always available, I can always access it, and I expect that more information in real time. And so companies on the other end of that are struggling to figure out how to provide that transparency and that visibility, as well as that accessibility and always on. One of the examples I like to use is banking. Because for me, banking represents the most visible thing to me. That's what represents digital transformation. 5 years ago, if you told me I would be doing all of my banking on my smartphone, I would have laughed. But here I am. I do 100% of my banking on my phone. I take photos of checks, which, by the way, is the coolest thing ever. I transfer money, I pay friends, I pay bills, I do all of that on my phone. And that may seem like a small step, but what that really represents is a huge shift on that bank's side of the way they think about technology. It represents a different way for them to engage with you, their customer. And that small mobile app seems small in conjunction to the hundreds of thousands of apps they have. But it also represents something else. How often are the apps on your phone updated? Once a year? Once a month? Once a week? Sometimes 3 times a month? And if you have a traditional legacy process for dealing with apps and deployments, can you keep up that pace? No. So what that little app represents is that bank's now understanding of continuous delivery, how to deliver agile code. There's been a lot of talks today about that shift, and I think that is an important part of it. In fact, I'd say that's the bulk part of it. But it really represents a different way for my bank and your bank to think about technology and how they communicate with you. Not only that code and that deployment process, but the feedback loop and the teams around that. And so that little app represents a massive change. So it leaves many of these organizations asking for their teams to really rethink how code is written. 12-factor apps, cloud-native application architectures, how it's deployed, continuous delivery, pipelines, but how it's changed. How do you continuously iterate that? Because it's not just enough to put it out there one time, but you have to keep iterating and reiterating and redeploying. And then the ramifications of that are how systems are managed. Are you running on-prem? Are you running in the cloud? How is it secured? How do you make sure that you're meeting both existing security guidelines, which Joe's going to talk a little bit about that later, and then for those of you that have been following the tragedy that is America right now, Equifax hack. All of our social security numbers are apparently, you can buy them now. And how it's scaled. You know, nothing pisses you off more when you're going to go buy something and the site drops because it's hugely popular. So being able to scale to accommodate those changes. And so when I posit the developers the new heroes, what that means is we're looking at technology as a means of giving developers that freedom to create. Giving developers, giving you that ability to create, turn your ideas into the reality, and get it into production as quickly as possible. So when I talk about Cloud Foundry, I like to call it a cloud application platform. For those of you analysts in the audience, you'll know it as a platform as a service. I am not a fan of that moniker, so I've kind of gone with cloud application platform because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is give developers that freedom. Giving developers the ability to create as quickly as possible and as easily as possible. And that's at the core of the vision of what Cloud Foundry is trying to do. Cloud Foundry is right now pretty popular in the enterprise. I have visions for it to go beyond enterprise and large organizations, but right now over half of the Fortune 500 are using it. More than that, we don't have an exact number on the G2000 when you talk globally, but over the half the Fortune 500 are using Cloud Foundry in some form or fashion. And that's important because when we think about digital transformation, we think about these change, particularly with your bank. or with the automotive company you buy your car from, or healthcare. We think about large organizations that are trying to become agile, that are trying to become and compete with smaller startups. I use the fintech one a lot because it's also got the most aggressive demands on it. There's over 2,000 fintech startups right now. So a lot of these big banks, the HSBCs, they're not competing against a JP&C or a Citibank anymore. They're competing against those 2,000 fintech startups. And so what we're trying to do is help level that playing field and really bring that agility and that flexibility to the enterprise. But we're at an IoT conference. So I'm going to show some IoT use cases. GE has been running Cloud Foundry for a long time. Predix, if you've heard of it, is based on Cloud Foundry. And they partnered with the government of Nicaragua to create an early warning system for volcanoes. I think this is the most impressive IoT solution out there. Because who doesn't want early detection on volcanoes? I can't compete with Gary at all. He's got way better jokes than I do. So they partnered with the government of Nicaragua, and GE Predix has written, using some of their IoT applications, are using monitors and sensors that are embedded in active volcanoes to do early detection. So their goal is to collect atmospheric pressure, humidity, temp, CO2, and many other facets from active volcanoes and use that as a predictive analytics on that volcano. And so the goal is to make that country more informed about when a volcano is about to erupt, thereby protecting the country, its citizens, and figuring out ways to get out ahead of these things. What was really interesting is, and to quote Sam Kosman from that team, this was an open source project. We will give access to the greater community of developers, technologists, and scientists around the world so they too can begin to answer some of their own questions. The way it becomes so much wider initiative that could spawn many more innovations and well beyond what we're doing. So I love the fact that they're taking IoT, they're taking this platform, they're open sourcing the technology and figuring out what else they can do with that. And that speaks volumes for both the role a developer plays and where things are going, but also where IoT is going and what the doors that is starting to open up. Another example is Mitsubishi. They've got a cloud-connected robot. They are pulling together an integration both from the physical asset that's on site to an IoT-based service-to-service call. So what they're doing is allowing their connection between their shop floor, where they're doing a lot of the creation, the build out, and they're connecting that to the back end and tracking that asset information, collecting data on progress, and really using that as an information gathering solution, pulling together details on what else they could be creating. Not just the assets they have, how fast are they creating them and what are they going to do with them? And to me, I see that as an entry-level case for IoT and big data, but an opportunity to build so much more when we think about predictive analytics, machine learning, and the ability to fundamentally change how an organization thinks about hardware on premise. The partnership between Mitsubishi Electric and SAP has enabled customers and partners to easily link the shop floor and asset information with the SAP Cloud Platform for advanced analytics. And one of the things that I want to leave this with these two use cases is that this is just the beginning. This really represents early days on taking IoT technology, taking some of the apps, how they're taking that information they're gathering from sensors and operationalizing that. And I think we'll see a lot more from these companies over the next couple of years. But I'd be remiss in standing up here and talking about Cloud Foundry and not talking about the coolest piece, is it's open source. That means each and every one of you can participate. The amazing thing about open source, and I'm really new to open source, I've only been in it for a couple of years, is that it opens the door for diverse participation. In fact, it calls on more people to participate. And that's what drives innovation. I don't fundamentally think you can actually do real innovation, be really innovative, without a diverse participation around the table. Diverse organizations, diverse people. I think that is immensely important to both where technology is going, but the problems that it's starting to solve. A few numbers about Cloud Foundry, for those of you that aren't familiar, and I have to read them because I updated them yesterday. We have a new dashboard. Fenton and James, you'll be very excited. We have a dashboard now. We have had 76,000 commits in the last 12 months. That's 3,267 pull requests across 347 repositories with over 2,400 contributors. For those of you that don't know what that means it is an amazing high-velocity open source project. So we continue to have more people participating and continue to innovate and drive that technology forward. One of the things that I got to participate in last year, though, and the coolest thing about open source, is the Open Service Broker API project. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Cloud Foundry, it has this API that connects the services to the platform. It's highly flexible, super simple, elegant way to bind a service to an application. But it turns out that highly simplistic solution was also one of the best in the breed. And you're like, okay, why is she so excited about an API? I'm excited about an API because early last year we started a conversation with Google and the Kubernetes team. And they said, we like the way you're connecting services to an app. Why don't we work with you on that? And then came Red Hat, and then came SAP, and then came Fujitsu, and Pivotal. And we decided, how do we open this up and make it an industry standard specification? An industry standard way of connecting a service to an application. At the end of last year, we officially turned this into a working group. And it's one of the fastest growing open source projects that I think is out there. We're starting to see a tremendous amount of traction both in the Cloud Foundry community, but also in the Kubernetes community, in CNCF. And for those of you that would like to figure out how to participate, there's a website. The more, the merrier. Our goal is to continue to drive this, to build a marketplace of services that are accessible across any platform. Earlier this year, we also launched Kubo, which is Kubernetes on Bosch. And this basically has taken the Kubernetes technology, which is a container orchestrator, and used that with Bosch, which is a very large and complex orchestrator, basically a tool chain that orchestrates Kubernetes, and bring that production-grade, enterprise-grade technologies together. And both of these projects are, to me, representative of the value of open source, because it brings together companies that may be commercial competitors. In fact, they are commercial competitors in many ways. But it brings together people with competing potential interests to the table and say, hey, how do we work together to make this technology the best of breed? And then we'll figure out what we want to do to differentiate on that. And I highlighted those two because for me, they really represent the power of open source. But more importantly, they represent what is possible with diversity. I always drop what I'm doing and come and speak at any of the events the RedMonk team put on because they do an amazing job of bringing together diverse participants. James, Fenton, you both get mad credit for that. Because it's important. Diversity in technology is more important now than ever. You know, talking about developers are heroes, each of you are really paving the way of the future where every organization is going. And the more people we have participating in that, and the more diversity we have participating in that, means that we're going to get a better product, a better technology, and a better outcome. And that is so deeply important to the future of the industry that I care a lot about. I've been in my entire career and want to see it solve amazing problems in the future. So when I think about open source, that's really what it means to me, is bringing together diverse participation from different companies, different people with different backgrounds, and solving really, really, really hard problems. And that's what's exciting. And I think that's all the potential that sets at the table for all of us to work together on. I'd like to show quickly our NASCAR slides, is what we call them, which is all the logos from our community. We have nearly 70 members of our little open source community. But one of the things I'm most proud of is that 40% of the members of our open source community are users. I'd like to see that get to 50%, if not higher. Because what that means is companies like American Airlines and Ford, Home Depot, Volkswagen, Allianz, for them, digital transformation isn't just hiring a bunch of software developers and writing a little bit more code. For them, they're also investing in open source. And they're investing in open source in a real way. They're writing real checks because it's important to them. And I think it speaks volumes as they start growing their software development teams and the work they're doing to build that out. To me, it speaks volumes about what they're going to be able to do. So we've got a cloud application platform, which is bringing together creativity, making it easier for developers to write code and get it into production, combined with open source, the ability to bring together diverse participation and drive innovation. And that's Cloud Foundry in a nutshell. It's something that I'm really deeply passionate about, and I hope you will be as well. Earlier this year, and for those of you that are aspiring developers, aspiring in this space, we launched the Cloud Foundry Certified Developer Training Program. So we have a massive open online course that is available online. It is free. It's an intro to Cloud Foundry. It's also an intro to cloud native architectures. And it is free to anyone that wants to take that. We also have self-paced training that's available on our platform and a certification exam. The training is important, more so than me just promoting Cloud Foundry. It's important because it also teaches cloud native best practices and cloud native application architecture best practices. And for many of you that are aspiring developers and trying to get in the space or trying to figure out what the cloud market is doing, understanding cloud native best practices is an amazing way to start down that path. Understanding the fundamentals of cloud native is really only going to grow as more and more organizations are moving workloads to platforms and to the cloud. I also want to give a shout out to our 6 certified platforms that are out there. These are organizations that have gone through a rigorous certification process around Cloud Foundry. And finally, I want to leave you just with a few points. 1, get certified. I'm really excited about the training and certification program we have, but more importantly, I'm excited about the developers that are up and coming that are going to fundamentally change our world. Come be part of our community. We are always looking for more contributors, committers, and people that just want to participate. Champion adoption of Cloud Foundry and cloud native best practices in your organization. Be part of the movement. Attend Cloud Foundry Summits. It's coming up in Europe. For those of you that love Basel in the fall time, October 11th and 12th, please come join us. And if you take nothing else away from my talk, think big, because each and every one of you are going to change where we go. And I'm looking forward to see where that goes. Thank you.